Well, thanks everybody for joining us for this public information session, providing an update on phase 4 of the Kicking Horse Canyon project, which is being carried out on the traditional territories of the Ktunaxa Nation and the Secwepemc Nation. We on the project team greatly value our relationship with these Indigenous communities who have called this area home since long before the arrival of the European settlers. For this evening, we have an hour set aside to spend a few moments with the welcome and introductions, a bit of a project overview, and a site tour. It'll be almost like a walk through the entire construction zone. And then we'll spend a little bit of time going over traffic management, the overview of the strategy, and a little bit of a review of how things went, especially with the extended closures in the springtime. Some of the lessons we've learned and how we've been applying those lessons, and looking ahead to what's left for the rest of the summer and the fall. And we'll have some time set aside to respond to questions as well. To ask questions, you'll have an opportunity to pose your questions at any time throughout the webinar period. We will be responding to them toward the end of the period. You can submit them at any time by hitting that Q&A icon. Now, the session is being recorded and it'll be posted on our project website, kickinghorsecanyon.ca, together with the answers to the questions that have been asked. And if we're unable to get to all of the questions before the webinar ends, before this session ends, then we'll be making sure that we address those and respond to them as well together and get them posted together with the recording. I'd like to introduce the information session panel. We have a number of colleagues here from the combined team from Kicking Horse Canyon Project on the province's side and Kicking Horse Canyon Constructors on the side of the contractor. And I'll invite them in turn to turn on their video and their microphones and introduce themselves before we actually get into the remainder of the presentation. Mike, I'll start with you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Mike Lorimer. I'm the Executive Project Director for the Kicking Horse Canyon Project. And thanks for joining us tonight.
Art McLean is next.
Good evening, everybody.
There he is.
Sorry, good evening, everybody. My name is Art McLean. I'm the operations manager for the Kicking Horse Canyon project on the project team. And thanks for taking the time tonight.
Hi, good evening. I'm Caroline Keddy. I'm Director of Communications and Engagement with Kicking Horse Canyon Constructors.
And I'm Chris Coop. I'm the Structures Technical Manager with the Kicking Horse Canyon Constructors.
And Kyle Ruda, Walls and Foundations Technical Manager with Kicking Horse Canyon Constructors.
Hello, I'm Jason Schleppe. I'm the Environmental Manager with Kicking Horse Canyon Constructors.
Hi there, Katie Ward, District Manager out of the Rocky Mountain District here in Cranbrook.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Greg Johnson. I am Director of Stakeholder Relations with British Columbia Infrastructure Benefits. We are the employer of the skilled trades workforce on the project.
Hi, everyone. I'm Catherine Florence. I'm the Acting Associate Project Director and the Environment and Archaeology Lead for the province. Thanks for making the time tonight.
Hello, everyone. It's Robin Taylor. I'm the Senior Environmental Assessment Manager supporting Catherine for environmental aspects of the project from Hemera.
Hello, I'm John Chant. I'm Communications Representative with KHCP, and I'll be moderating the Q&A session tonight. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, everybody, for introducing yourselves. We'll now move along to, I'll pass it over to Mike Lorimer, our Executive Project Director, just to remind ourselves why we are doing this project and why it's so important.
Thanks, Jack. And I think for anybody who's been through the corridor, and I know for myself, I come from the Ministry of Transportation background, and I know the area well. And I think what we're trying to achieve here is relatively straightforward in concept, a little more challenging in the delivery. And what we're looking to do is upgrade the last section of provincial highway on the east side of Golden. It's about 4.8 kilometers through the Kicking Horse Canyon. And really our primary goals are to improve traveler safety. I think one of the things we hear on the corridor all along the Trans-Canada is about reliability. So that's a big important one to us, is making sure that the highway is there and available to use when you need it. And then I think the other things that come along with this is and it speaks to reliability, is we're going to be working really hard to mitigate the rockfall and avalanche that we see routinely through the canyon. With the way the highway is now, it's exposed to some pretty challenging slopes. And while we'll never be able to completely take away the hazard, the design that we're working on will make a big difference there. And then finally, working really hard to come up with a design that reduces the wildlife vehicle collisions. We're looking at things like wildlife fencing, and then some of the passage structures underneath the bridges, and looking to get the animals across the highway without putting themselves at risk and putting the travelers at risk. And then just real briefly on the project overview of where we're at. While we've been talking about this project for quite a while and getting the funding in partnership with the federal government, it took a fair bit of time to get this thing up and ready. And as of November 6th of last year, we formally awarded the contract to the Kicking Horse Canyon Constructors. And that company, while you may not have heard of it before this job, it is a partnership between Aecon Group, Parsons Inc., and Emil Anderson Construction, all of whom have a history in the corridor on previous projects. And they know the area well, and they came together to form the partnership that we see here tonight. The construction began in fall 2020 on a pretty limited scope, some of the geotechnical exploration and some of those real advanced works. And we got up to speed here in April of this year, and really we're up and running and out the gates. And I think as you've driven through the site, you'll see lots and lots of activity there. We're still on track for our substantial completion in the winter of 2023 and 24. Over to you, Jack.
Thanks, Mike. And without further ado, let's take a tour.
Hi, good evening. We've got the Kicking Horse Canyon Constructors team here. We're happy to be here this evening. It's a pleasure to be here. We're here representing a very diverse and inclusive workforce that is here on the project, mostly made up of Golden locals as well as British Columbians that have mobilized. And what I'd like to do is just sort of pass over to both of our technical leads here in our management team, to Chris and Kyle, to walk you through from the west side of the project.
And before we do that with Chris, just wanted to mention that this flyover actually takes advantage of some very recent photography. We're coming up on an area here where the images, like the landscape images, were taken about a week to 10 days ago. So what you see here, and we'll be zooming in on it when we get the site-by-site tour from Chris and Kyle, we'll be able to zoom in and see from an aerial perspective a lot of this recent work that has been taking place. This gives you an idea of the number of structures that are involved, and the walls and the cuts that need to be undertaken. Big one at Dart Creek, of course, and then the bridge work happening here at the west end of the project. So Chris, here we go. Let's start at the west end. This is the entrance to the canyon here, right? And walk us through. What are you doing here? And before you do, actually, I'm going to zoom in. You can see here all of this work that's been happening. This is all stuff from just a couple of weeks ago, and during the past couple of weeks. So I'll hand it over to you, Chris. Walk us through this.
Yeah, so where we're starting off here on the west end is where we drop down from the existing 4 lanes down to 2 lanes heading east out of Golden. And the first task there is widening out the alignment. We've got a little bit of a upslope wall just to hold back some of the mountain so we can get some extra width. And then we have our first structure, which we're calling Sheep Bridge. We've kind of hit that area hard as one of the first areas that we're focusing on. And basically it's pretty typical 4 4-lane highway bridge across a small gully. And this first picture that Jack's going to pop up here, we've got a concrete pour that we've just about wrapped up. We've got the guys just putting the final touches on the surface of the concrete. With the limitations on traffic, a lot of this work is happening at night to try and minimize any inconvenience to the traveling public.
We've got another picture here as well. What's going on down here? It looks like a bed of nails.
So what we've got there, because of some of the difficult access conditions, we've had to utilize a technology called micropiling. In essence, instead of a normal foundation that you'd see under a bridge, we have a lot of very small piles that we can use small equipment to install. And so there we've got a typical downslope foundation in some of the harder to access areas.
So are the micropiles any different from the major piles other than the size? I mean, what kind of support do they provide?
Yeah, very similar in support to the larger piles. There's just smaller size so that you get more of them to carry the same load.
Okay. So what?
As we continue to move east here, we've got our first big rock cut that's upslope. So we'll be doing some rock removal there, and then we head into what is our first viaduct. And a viaduct is, it's a type of bridge structure, but it looks a little bit more like a parkade. Lots of smaller, shorter spans back to back to back to get us up and above the ground and through some difficult conditions.
What's happening here?
This is where we're constructing some access to get our equipment down slope. So that's constructing a location for a crane to sit to do some of our large diameter piling. It's an area that's a little bit easier to access than some of the steeper downslope areas.
So you're creating benches and platforms to be able to do the work from. Is that how that works?
Exactly, yeah. And again, a lot of this is related to getting our equipment and our manpower off the highway to minimize the disruption during construction.
It looks like this may be where you're actually doing the early work to get that access.
Correct, yeah. Similar location, just from the other view. And that was done early on to get our engineers some information to build off of. So we did some preliminary boreholes and geotechnical sampling.
Okay. Another one over here. Just from the other point of view. Is this the area where you've been installing the micropiles?
Yeah, that was the first area that we started on the micropiling. And then up to the left is a crane trestle that was constructed in an effort to give us some stable ground to put in so we can reach the work down slope while staying off the highway. And I think one other thing to note here, and not visible from here, but with this large span structure that's going in, it's one of the animal passages that will allow the local wildlife to get under the new highway and up the slope.
Right. Now, would this trestle remain, or is this something that gets removed after the work is carried out?
That will be removed once the work is complete.
Okay. All right. Let's take it a little bit further east now.
So as we continue to head east, we have a long viaduct. It's roughly 800 meters long of structure in 25-meter sections.
And this is the driving of some piles in that area, right?
It's quite a unique technology. Now maybe I'll pass it over to Kyle. He can describe a little bit more what's going on with the piling.
Yes, we've implemented a case pile system for the majority of the project. The dual rotary installation allows us to be a little more flexible than the conditions, as well as staying back from the location. Some of these locations obviously are very close to the edge of the crest down slope. So heavy equipment near there is a difficult prospect. So there's a lot of stabilization that goes into it before we start the work. And then this allows us to put the equipment kind kind of unmanned pieces that are over to install the pile, and then the crane operator sitting back a bit from it. So this, if you've driven through the area, you've seen kind of these sticking up along the length, along that, what we're calling links viaduct. So this is the basis of what will get kind of linked together with the rest of the structure afterwards.
So is this still going to be, in this picture, does this get driven down even further, or do they get cut off? Like what happens? Do they go down until they hit bedrock?
That one, yeah. So everything through this area goes down into the bedrock, and then the steel is actually driven in or drilled into the bedrock. And depending on the quality of the rock below, the geotech makes a recommendation on how deep it's got to go. So these ones are majority about 4 or 5 meters into the bedrock below. And then these will be cut off very close to the existing road surface to build a future structure off of, a touch just below what's visible there. This was just when they finished up, so the excess piece wasn't cut off yet.
So how deep do they go in this area, roughly?
This area is around 35 meters to 40 meters. A little bit further to the west of here is closer to 55, 60 meters. A little bit east of here is more like 25 type of thing. So it's following the conditions of the rock below, so we can find that good support past the kind of less stable ground that's sitting on top of it.
So are these like glorified sonotubes?
If you can put a sonotube down into the ground, that is kind of a statement. You get a little more stiffness out of the steel than you would out of card though.
Right, and then they get filled with concrete,
steel,
right?
They use that steel instead of having rebar in the pile, so it's a little more effective having the strength on the outside.
Okay, got it. All right, thanks. Now we've also got a cut up here. Tell us about this upslope cut.
So this we kind of looked at a couple different options through here. At one point was a bit of a stabilized wall, but we found it was a difficult install with the anchors and just the positioning of it. So that kind of soil mass that's sitting up above the road there, we'll cut it back at a slope that so it won't kind of continue to move. In the past, that is an area that has had a bit of movement a long time back. I think relating back to the 60s, but so a good chunk of that overburden will be removed from the top, so it's not a threat of kind of sliding on the road in the future. And then further to the east of there, kind of just behind, if that next picture maybe, I think, is a little less soil and a little more rock. So through that area, just to get the width of the highway, looking at a cut into the rock there, just to get the width we need to be able to get that 4 lanes in.
Now this is the area where we had the first blast on the project, right? This trim blast. This was something that occurred a few weeks ago. What's the purpose of these trim blasts?
Yeah, so the trim blast is a small shot taken to just remove a portion of extremely difficult to get to rock, where it's just not safe to have people do it in person to be able to get that down and knock the rock down towards the road, as well as just impossible to kind of get mechanical equipment up to remove. So it's a small blast just to remove that portion of the rock, and then allows us to continue past safely to be able to keep that trail moving up towards the bulk of the cut where the majority of the rock's going to come out.
And then the scaling work begins to remove anything loose, right?
Exactly, yeah. So after the trim blast, we've got guys on ropes that follow it down and make sure that there's nothing hung up and going to be an issue for safety for when we open the road back up.
You really get a perspective on an image like this, really how high these rock walls actually are. And even this one here, accessing the cut, there's a big yellow machine there that you can see amongst the cluster of the trees. This is what's the purpose of this access road there? Is that just to get better positioned to do the excavation?
That's right, yeah. So we started a fair ways back to be able to build that ramp, that kind of pioneer trail up towards the rock cut. And then you've got access for hauling muck out once the blast is complete up from the top, as well as you can get your drill rig in there up top to be able to drill to get that blast pattern in.
All right. Let's keep heading east here. This is the area that you know is cut 3, right? The approach in the vicinity of Dart Creek.
That's correct. Yes, there's another steel girder structures before that Frenchman's Bridge, and then we're through the rock bank into what is a pretty visible area of work if you're driving westbound through the job there. So the top of that was a bit of soil, and now we're at the point now we're into the rock, and we started the first blast in that area as well. So I think they're on 3 now, I believe. So we've got the first one. You start off small. It's a progressive system, so just to ensure that the process is done correctly and we're not affecting anything negatively, and kind of build up as you go. So slightly larger each time. Then that's bringing the material down. So the soil disposal site is up that Dart Creek Forest Road. So this is just a cycle of trucks coming through, getting loaded out, and then back up the road, taking material away.
So this entire section is going to be removed by the time you're done?
The bit on the left there, some of that will stay. So it'll be kind of a through cut, similar to the east of the bridge, just east.
Bridge.
Yeah. So it similar look to that. A little more rock on that one than this one has. So the top will look a little different, but very similar to that cut. Yeah.
Oh,
And Jack, just to jump in here, on this Dart Creek Forest Service Road, this is one of the locations that we're going to have a wildlife gate, just to prevent wildlife from accessing the highway from that Forest Service Road. And seeing some questions pop up here as we're talking through, this would have been one of the areas that a tunnel would have been considered, but due to the conditions on site and fractured rock, tunneling is just not an effective or good solution for this section of the Rockies.
now we've got a series of walls.
That's right. Yeah. So we tried to avoid the upslope of this section of the highway is a already very steep cut into the rock, and it's been there and standing up a long time, and it's not something we want to get further into. We'd end up chasing it very far uphill. So we elected to move down slope and build a wall to widen through this section. So it's a bit of a combination of different types of walls, but for the most part mechanically stabilized earth with either piled foundations or right on the rock, but looking at building down slope and widening from there.
So what's the source of the material that you use for this? Do you use some of the stuff that you've taken away at say cut 3 to build up this area?
Yeah, we're kind of working through that potential. The blast rock from cut 3 is a good source. At this point, we're just trying to find enough space to be able to process it. So there's other local gravel pits nearby. We can use an import material, but that is a potential we're looking at right now. Actually, yes, is that blast rock and cut 3 process, and then use it just next door at the walls there.
So I got to ask you this: why are you using a dinky little thing like that down here when you're building this huge wall?
So this is part of the remote access piling system. Having to get that crane down on the bottom would be extremely difficult, obviously. So it's a 300-ton crane that's sitting kind of just below the highway there. We've snuck it in, but even with the crane, the equipment we've got, we still have to have a level pad down on the bottom just to get that the lower piece of equipment set level. So there's a little trail cut down there just to create those pads for us.
Let's keep moving east here. What do we got here? The Blackwall Bridge, that's a fair span, isn't it?
Take that one.
Yeah, so that we've got another viaduct leading into the Blackwall Bridge. I think the locals call that Bus Corner. And so we, at the midspan of that bridge, we're up over 50 meters in the air. This is another location where we're using micropiles. Part of the reason is we're 50 meters away from the highway and 50 meters down. So it's hard to get any kind of real substantial equipment down there. And here's a great view showing where the bridge is going and why we need it. Again, building off what Mike was saying, the main point of this project is to make this highway safer. So adding 2 lanes to make a 4-lane highway, straightening out some of the curves, flattening some of the grade changes, and just allowing a much smoother flow of traffic, and improving on the safety of the existing highway. We'll have full width shoulders both sides of each 2-lane section, and yeah, basically just drastically improving the flow of traffic through this section of Dangerous Canyon.
Now, you're not as far advanced on the eastern portion of the alignment. Am I right about that?
That's right, yeah. So we're kind of working towards this area now. That the bit up just the top of the screen, the 2 viaducts, Hedgehog and Marmot, we're just looking at getting access in now. And then the Caribou bit, the fill is a realignment of the access down to the CP track below. So we've got some work that's been done down there after a pretty extensive geotechnical program. So they've got a realignment of that initial road, and we're currently moving the hydro poles just down the side there. So that's opened up some more space up top with the hydro gone. We can kind of start to work there now. So we'll be starting there this fall through this area. And then kind of after that, there's one more section of kind of structure on the end, and then we transition back to where we're back to 4 lanes just east of the project. That's kind of
the oval bridge right here. All right. Yeah, thanks for that. It's amazing to watch the amount of progress that has already taken place here. So with all of that, you can see how challenging it is to carry out this work with while managing traffic. And when we were looking at this project before it began, there were a lot of considerations that we had to take into account in developing the traffic management strategy. One was obviously the condition of the alignment and the difficulty in doing anything there without affecting traffic. I mean, I've often said that you can't even change a flat tire there without interfering with traffic, let alone carve away half a mountain. Other factors, of course, are the safety of the traveling public and the crews who are actually working on the job, recognizing that it is a heavily traveled corridor, and the fact that we don't have any local detour options. So the whole matter of stopping traffic here was something that we didn't take lightly. With that, we develop an approach in consultation with the community liaison committee and key stakeholders in the community, as well as on a broader basis throughout the province, the commercial transportation industry and others, to see how we could manage traffic with the least amount of impact. It ended up being a fairly complex system, but it's one that made the highway available as much as we could by keeping stoppages and closures as much as possible to off-peak periods, by doing as much work as possible during the overnight periods, avoiding disruptions on long weekends. And when we had to have the extended multi-day closures, doing those only during the shoulder season when traffic is normally at its lowest ebb, both on the Trans-Canada Highway and on the alternate route of the Highways 93 and 95. And what we managed to achieve is something that was that worked fairly well, I think, from the point of view of the tourism industry, is that we managed to avoid daytime stoppages throughout the summer, with the exception of a couple of minutes here and there where maybe a flagger has to jump out and allow a truck to enter or leave the highway. We've had a few moments there of scaling and debris removal, doing that at 10 minutes at a time. And as you can appreciate, after a blast like the trim blast that we had, there's rubble that falls down onto the roadway. There's unstable rock that needs to be removed before it has a chance to fall onto the roadway, especially when the traffic is going by. We've also had a couple of occasions, I think, of pavement repair that has involved single lane alternating traffic, but by and large, we have managed to avoid any significant stoppages during the daytime in the summer. What we have had, and this is going to continue throughout the course of the entire project, is we've had evening single lane alternating traffic, SLAT as we call it, between 8 and 10 in the evening, and overnight closures from 10 until 7 in the morning. And that'll continue, as I say, for the duration of the project, except when we have added the daytime SLAT that's coming up toward the middle of September, which is kind of midday period between 9 and 3. And then, of course, the extended multi-day closures that are going to be coming back into effect this fall, starting on September 20th. Now, the exceptions to the extended multi-day closure this fall are the last weekend in September. We won't be having the extended closure during that last weekend of September, and the long Thanksgiving holiday weekend, the highway will be open as well. But the rest of that fall period, the off season, is going to be once again with an extended closure period. Now, we learned some lessons, and I'll get to those very shortly. But one thing I wanted to mention before we leave this is that if you want to know and plan in advance for when is the highway going to be open, if you haven't already gone there, there is a calendar page on the kickingHorseCanyon.ca website that will give you a day-to-day, hour-by-hour situation display of what the condition of the highway is as far as the plans to have it open or closed. And you can go through it. We've got it updated now until the end of November. And you can see when we go here into September, we've got the no stoppages during the Labor Day weekend. And then as we proceed into the latter part of the month, we've got the last weekend is open, but extended 24-hour closures during the weekdays in September. In the latter part of the month. And the same thing then also occurs for October. So you can plan your travels in advance. And if you then want to make sure about the condition of the highway based on what we hope or what we plan is going to be the case, you then should go to Drive BC and just verify that what we are planning is actually what's going to be happening. Usually you'll find them in alignment, but every once in a while, Drive BC will give us an update that we haven't been able to anticipate in the calendar. So that's something that you may want to look at. And Drive BC, if you don't feel like just visiting there every time, you can subscribe to updates, identify the area that you want to have updates on, and you will get automatically notified by email when there's a change in status. The other thing I'd like to mention too is, because sometimes people think that the entire highway from Castle Junction is closed during these extended closures or overnight closures, and that's not the case. The only segment of the road that's closed during these traffic stoppages is that 4.8 kilometers that is the construction zone between the canyon entrance and Yoho Bridge. All of the businesses, all of the properties at the top of Golden Hill remain accessible from Golden, and you can visit Beaverfoot from the east very easily. And as my colleague Art likes to say, if you want to have lunch at the Kicking Horse Canyon rest area, you can do that as well. So all of that remains accessible even in the extended closures. Now, I mentioned the alternate route during the extended closures. We use it during the off-peak periods only when the baseline levels are at their lowest. Yes, it adds an hour and a half to the trip, but at least there is a way around. It's not as if you can't get through it all, and that's an important thing to remember. We did undertake a detailed assessment before we committed to this. We did a detailed assessment back in 2019 to make sure that there's capacity to take the additional traffic during these off-peak periods, and we found yes, there is plenty of capacity to do that. And our spring 2021 experience with the extended closure actually bore that out. And what we found this spring when we took a look back and assessed the performance of the alternate route was that the traffic volumes were somewhat lower than we expected. This graph here shows that normally at that time of year, in fact, just before the extended closure began in the spring, we were experiencing up to a little over 200 vehicles per hour in the peak period, say around 3 in the afternoon. That was what we considered the baseline level. And what we expected after that was, when we did the closure, anything up to potentially nearly 600 vehicles per hour at around 5 in the afternoon. What we actually experienced was something less than that, something less than 500 vehicles in the typical April weekday. Similarly, for the weekends, we did expect that what we would consider a base level of just over 200 vehicles at the peak hour of 2 o'clock would rise to something in excess of 600 vehicles around the middle of the afternoon. And what we actually experienced was something lower than that, more like splitting the difference at about 400 vehicles. Now, something that we have to acknowledge is that these are COVID-influenced numbers as well. There were fewer cars on the road during that period, but I think what we've also found is that the capacity definitely is there, and that the analysis that we undertook before the project began has been borne out. Other things that we learned from looking back on the use of the alternate route in the springtime was that the truck ratio was higher than we expected. And that ratio was higher partly because there were fewer cars on the road, but in general, there were even more trucks on the road during that period than we thought we might have. And that's a phenomenon that was actually experienced province-wide during the peak of the COVID period. We also had a look at the speeds that people were driving, and especially because there had been some concerns about people speeding on the alternate route, and especially in unfamiliar territory and the risks that entails. And what we found was, obviously there are exceptions, but the average speeds were right at about the posted limits. There were more incidents, more motor vehicle incidents, more wildlife incidents, and more violations reported by the RCMP and the commercial vehicle safety and enforcement people. But that was basically consistent with what you would expect. When there's more traffic, there will be more incidents. And that has been offset by reductions of such incidents on the Trans-Canada Highway when the traffic wasn't flowing there. So those were some of the findings that we found as far as the spring experience goes. Some of the takeaways that we also took away from that is that the awareness and communication of closures was really essential and was something that people really valued. The addition of the calendar to the project website it's become the most popular page, and the amount of attention that Drive BC gets and the notifications that are issued by KHCC has suggested that the awareness is out there, and certainly there were very few people who indicated any surprise when they encountered a closure. We did find that we had to tweak some of the traffic controls and the wayfinding a little bit, that there was a little bit of motorist confusion at the beginning, and the signage has been clarified. So that is in a state of continuous improvement, and everywhere we have the opportunity to make an improvement, we've been applying that. We had a pass system, which we'll get into a little bit more detail in a moment, and also a system combined with that to allow school buses and first responders to get through the project zone. And those appear to have worked fairly well for us as well. The school buses got through at the appointed times. First responders got through on 15 minutes notice as required when they had lights and sirens. And we were able to have commuters who need to get between Golden and Field for work purposes to be able to get through small windows during that construction period. Overall, the alternate route performed well. However, an additional takeaway was that safe speeds and motorist vigilance really are essential, both through the construction zone and on the alternate route. I mentioned earlier about people not being so familiar with highways 93 and 95. And so it's essential really because of the presence of workers in the construction zone, children near the highway on the alternate route, wildlife on the highway and near the highway anywhere, that really it is really a fundamental requirement that people drive safely through these areas. I mentioned the passes. So we introduced a system of commuter passes, what we call a season pass, in the springtime for the first extended closure. The season was not only for the spring season, but for the entire year. So the passes that we issued for people who qualified as commuters, requiring regular travel between Golden and Field or Field and Golden for work purposes, that system is pretty much at capacity now. Now, mind you, most of the folks who are going to need these passes or who were going to need these passes would already have obtained them in the springtime, and they can use them again in the fall. We will reintroduce the system again for the spring closure next year with a whole set of new passes. But the spring passes we issued this year are good for the fall extended closure, and we won't be issuing very many more because we are so close to capacity. We can only get through maybe one car out of every 10 that normally goes through the canyon at any time, and we got to squeeze them in during a 15-minute window in each direction. In the morning and in the afternoon. So you can appreciate that we have to limit the availability of these passes to people who really, really, really urgently need them. Now, in addition to the season passes, we also had a day pass for those random urgent trips that really wouldn't qualify for a season pass where somebody travels every day, but people, say with a medical appointment in Calgary or something like that, we had this system of day passes where we asked people to apply the day before they do their travel, and then print out the pass that would be visible to the flaggers when they arrived at the zone. They would use the same passage windows as the season pass folks, and we will have a limited number of day passes available again in the fall. Obviously, because, as I mentioned, we're very heavily subscribed on passes through the canyon. There won't be many issued on any day, but they will be issued on a first-come, first-served basis, and very much on a very limited basis. So we have a web page on our project website, kickinghorsecanyon.ca, that we retired for the summer. We put it into hibernation for a little while because we didn't need the passes during the summer period. And we will be restoring that page by the end of August, where people can go and apply for their passes and get more information about the pass system. Now, the benefits of this project go well beyond just the long-term benefits of the infrastructure itself. One of the benefits, of course, is the fact that we've got a lot of employment happening as a result. And I've got Greg here from Greg Johnson from BCIB to talk about BCIB, who they are and what they do.
Thanks, Jack. So BCIB may not be a household name yet, but Jack did a decent introduction because we are a Crown corporation. That's a provincial BC corporation that was created to essentially grow and diversify the skilled trades workforce in British Columbia. We hear from contractors all the time there's a skilled trade shortage. It's very acute in many trades. And so to help grow the skilled trades workforce, the province introduced a community benefits agreement that applies to a select number of projects around the province. And the Kicking Horse Canyon Project Phase 4 is one of them. What that means is that there's priority hiring for people who were traditionally underrepresented in the trades. So that's typically Indigenous people, it's women, it's visible minorities, people who identify as LGBTQS+. If people apply on our website and identify themselves as one of those underrepresented groups, and I should say locals too, locals are considered a group that receives priority hiring on this project, then they're among the first to be hired and to build the crews for the contractor KHCC. So what we've been doing is we've had meetings with local groups. We've talked with the Chambers of Commerce, Mayor and Council, different communities around the area and different networks to make sure we get as many people as possible to register and apply for work with BCIB. And so this is how we help build the workforce. I know there's a question that was asked about how local carpenters can get to work on the project, and the best answer is to apply. Go to bcib.ca and apply. Here's the link. It's our website, bcib.ca. And what we do is we help create a pool of workers, and it's a blended approach to hiring. So the contractor gets to pick a number of people to help build the crew, and then we get to pick a number of people from the locals that we've recruited to help build that crew. So it creates a blended approach, and so we can help make sure that locals and folks who are traditionally underrepresented in the skilled construction trades get an opportunity to build their career while working close to home. So, of course, the benefit of this isn't just the highway infrastructure that's going to be built as part of the project. What we want to do once the
Lost you there, Greg. Sorry, I think we've lost Greg. But I think you made the important point there of the heavy emphasis on hiring locally, and also to I think we're looking at anywhere from 100 to 300 people working on the project during the course of the year. So here's the information. Apply at bcib.ca if you're looking for a job, and you have the skills to apply. Now I think in some of the promotional material we had actually talked about some never seen before blast video, but let's go to some of the questions and answers before we do that, because we're already at 10 minutes to the hour, and we'd like to devote a little bit of time to responding to questions. And John, I wonder if you're able to maybe have distributed some to the team.
Yeah, I have. And first, I'd like to say we're not going to be able to get anywhere close to answering all the questions tonight, but we will be recording that. We have recorded the session and are recording it, and the session will be saved to Kicking Horse Canyon website. And questions that we do not get to tonight will be answered at that time and when it's posted. First question, I think, is for Chris or Kyle. What's the difference between a viaduct and a bridge?
Not much is the easy answer. The bridges are typically going to be a little bit taller, longer spans between the supports holding up the sections of structure. The viaducts are typically going to be only a meter or two above the ground. And those are used to span kind of long areas of weak underlying soil or other impacts that we want to avoid digging into the ground and creating a large excavation. Whereas structures that the long span, they act as our animal crossings below the highway right of way. Hopefully that answers the question.
Great. Yes, thank you. I think while I have you here, another question that came in, are there going to be any viewpoint stops along the section when it's finished? And how wide will shoulders be on the viaducts in case of a vehicle breakdown, things like that?
Well, there are no planned viewpoints on this stretch of highway. One of the main reasons for this improvement is the hazards above the highway, the rock falls and avalanche hazards in the area. So I think the intention is to discourage people from stopping on this stretch of highway. And for shoulder width, it's a full 2.5 meter wide shoulder, sufficient for a large vehicle to pull off and out of traffic if there's a breakdown. And there's shoulders both sides of the traffic lanes.
Great, thank you. Just give me a second while I sort through a few of these questions.
I noticed one asking, who's this Jack guy? Sorry, I neglected to introduce myself at the beginning. My name is Jack Stumple. I am the Communications and Engagement Lead for the Kicking Horse Canyon project. Worked on the first 3 phases as well, so it's kind of cool to be working on the 4th and final phase.
And Catherine, Catherine Lawrence, if you're there, I have a question about the sheep. How have the sheep population fared to date?
Yep. Hi, Jack, or sorry, everybody. Jack and John, thanks for the question. And, I'll say we as a project team spend a lot of time talking about sheep, so I appreciate the question on sheep. One of the purposes of the project, one of the main objectives, as was discussed in one of the first slides, was really around reducing highway-related wildlife incidents. And so, that's one of the main objectives of this project. Unfortunately, as with sort of previous years, we have seen a few wildlife mortality incidents within the project area, a few of them related to sheep, which again speaks to the need for the project. So I know KHCC is currently working on their design for their wildlife fencing system, and Chris sort of spoke to some of the wildlife passage as well. That'll be a kind of a key part of the project and sort of help with that objective of reducing wildlife mortality. And one thing that we'll see in the short term is just with construction occurring along the highway, we expect to see, and we will see, reduced driver speed, which should hopefully have some positive impact. But as Jack mentioned, obviously driver speed and safety continues to be something that we're watching and of importance to the project. So hopefully that answers it, John.
Thanks, Catherine. Yeah. I think another one possibly for Chris and Kyle. There have been several questions about the how things are working with CP Rail. Are we impacting their operations? They're obviously below where the work is being done, and how's the safety thing going for them?
You muted? Yeah. So there's a lot of engagement with CP Rail. It's a daily process. We've got representation from CP that's here in direct communication with our supervision on site. So I walk at least once a week and reviewing everything that's about to happen, as well as everything that's ongoing. And we've implemented a bunch of kind of downslope measures to ensure we are not affecting the rail traffic below. So there's a fence installed along the length of the majority of the hazardous areas where there might be some rockfall or any potential movement down slope of us, as well as with that communication in kind of high risk areas or higher risk, maybe I should say, tasks that get positive track protection. So something like the blasting that's undertaken, CP is notified ahead of time. We've got a window where they got a track block set up. And then during that time, you complete the blast, and you're scaling, clean the road off, safe for everybody, and then we proceed from there. So yeah, the best thing going on about is just the level of communication.
Great, thank you. Appreciate that. Unfortunately, those are all the questions we have time for tonight. And as I said earlier, and Jack, I think, mentioned, we will be posting this online and we will get around to answering all the questions. Back to you, Jack.
All right. So looking for where this is going to be posted, go to the project website, kickinghorsecanyon.ca. That's really the font of all knowledge. If you take nothing away as far as where to get information, other than this, is kickinghorsecanyon.ca. It leads to everywhere else. It'll lead to our Facebook page. It'll lead to our YouTube page. It'll lead to Drive BC, and of course also to KHCC's 24/7 information line, which I've displayed for you here. So this presentation will be displayed there. We'll post it there, hopefully within about a week's time. And all of the questions that have been asked and answered will be posted there, as well as the ones that have been asked and we haven't been able to get to tonight. A wealth of questions, and I really appreciate how curious people have been about so many factors and so many aspects of this project. And I think, before we leave maybe with a blast video, I'll just also hand it over to Mike Lorimer for maybe a couple of closing remarks.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. And I mean, I hope folks found the session informative tonight. I mean, I think it speaks volumes to the interest to take time out of your night to have a look at what we're doing on the canyon. You know, this is the first time we've used this kind of format for sharing information. We've all been working with video conferencing for a while, but you know, I hope you found this way of engaging at least accessible. I would definitely reinforce what Jack said. I mean, there's a number of ways to reach out to us. We will answer the questions. If other questions come up, you know, after you have time to digest the information tonight, there's lots of ways to reach out to us and find out about what's happening out there. I think one of the other things I just wanted to mention is that we're very focused on, I guess, continual improvement, and you know, I think refining things. If there are areas of concern that you see, we're definitely open to hearing them, understanding them, and you know, like we've demonstrated through some of our traffic management strategies already, looking at changes that make things better. We're here for a few more years. There's always ways to make it better, so we appreciate the feedback. My last little plug is I'm going to reinforce safety. It's first and foremost on this project, and you know, the part that you as the public can play on both the alternate route and through the project site are you know, follow the signs, watch out for workers, watch out for wildlife on the alternate route, and just take that time, ease off the gas pedal a little bit, and just, you know, help our folks get home safe and help you get to your destination safe. It's a really important part of what we're doing. And with that, I think Jack's going to show something that goes boom. And thanks, everybody.
No sound effects on this one. But that was one of the first blasts at Cut 3. With more to follow, we'll obtain more video as we're able to collect it. Some of the blasts have occurred during windier conditions when the drone would not be able to fly safely and make the observation. But this stuff is really interesting and very popular. So we'll make sure that we continue to collect photos and videos whenever and wherever we can, and continue to post them on our website. And there's the pile of rubble to be removed. Once again, thanks everybody for joining us. We hope you enjoyed the session and that this has worked for you. And we'll look at planning another one. Not sure when, but keep your eyes peeled on our Facebook page and on our project website. And if you haven't already done so, sign up for our newsletters. You can also find the link for that on the website. Once again, thanks everybody for coming, and we'll get this stuff posted as soon as we can, along with the answers to your questions. Good night, everybody.